Yeah, I know we're all part of PAACx, the Pan Asian American Council, but what does being Asian American actually mean?
I don't have an answer to you, Corey, but maybe our next speaker does.
Our final speaker is a fourth-year Behavioral Neuroscience major from just outside of Philadelphia. She has been very involved in the AAC community throughout her 4 years, notably serving as the AASIA co-chair last year and as a senior mentor this year. Today, she'll be sharing all about her experiences growing up and coming to terms with her Asian American identity.
Give it up for our final speaker of the night, Ava Clifford.
Okay, guys, my laptop is like massive, so give me 1 second to like figure it out. Oh, that's not the right thing. Bottom right here. Oh, yes. Okay, she did it. Yay. Okay. Hi, everyone. As mentioned, the title of my PAACx talk is Making Space for Multiracial People in Asia America. If I'm being 100% transparent, I did write that title before I had the speech written. As a result, I think it's a little misleading. I want to use today to talk more about my experience with my identity, losing it, finding it, losing it again, and then hopefully finding it for the last time. I hope this speech offers solace for those who feel similar to me and offers a new perspective to those who don't. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, hi, my name is Ava, and it's such an honor to be up here. You guys might know me from Asia, or you might be saying, who the heck is this girl? So I thought I'd take some time to introduce myself. Now, typically when we do introductions, it's the classic, hi, my name is blank, my major is blank, yada yada. However, I was recently doing introductions at this roundtable, and instead of asking for that information, the person leading the discussion asked us to address one question instead. Who are you from? I thought it was such an interesting question. Who am I from? Some of you guys are probably like, what does that even mean? Well, I think some of the most telling things about a person don't come from their major or where they're from. Instead, you learn a lot about a person based on who their family is, where they're from, and what their stories are. So I thought in order for you guys to get to know a little bit more about me, I'd introduce the most important people in my life, my family. So some people apparently, I don't know if they're here, it's Rachel, did not know this about me, so I'm going to start with this point. My dad is from Ireland. Yes, he is born and raised there. His family is really Irish, to the point where my great-grandfather was actually in the IRA and used to watch for British troops on the coast of Ireland. My grandfather grew up in a county called Kerry and was the youngest out of 7. There he is, with my uncle. And my grandmother grew up in a county called Kilkenny, there it is, and was the second oldest of 8. They met in a town called Shannon, where they had 4 kids, including my dad, who was the second youngest. My dad was the first person in his family to go to college, and at 18 moved to Dublin to start school. After college, he won a green card for a lottery for a green card to move to the United States and moved to New Jersey. After moving around for a bit, he settled in Philadelphia. And though he didn't know this at the time, this would be an life-altering decision because my mom would end up being his roommate. And now we play my favorite clip ever. While I grew up knowing a lot about my dad, my mom's history was a little bit more muddy for me. I've always known that my mom, who is right here, was born in New York City. Both of my grandparents were doctors in Taiwan, so she often spent time with nannies and babysitters. When she was 8, they moved to Westchester, New York, and then after high school, she got accepted into a school in Philadelphia, where she went to study business and art history. My grandparents wanted her to be a doctor, and so, like the rebel she is, she did the exact opposite. She ended up staying in Philadelphia for work, and later to move to an apartment that, coincidentally, my dad also moved to. The rest, as they say, is history. They got married, had a house, got 3 kids, the whole shebang. So, here are my siblings and I. I know this may be a shock for you guys. Oh, that's not my siblings, that's my parents. This is my siblings and I. This might shock some of you guys, but I am, in fact, the oldest. This is my brother, Liam, over on the right. He goes to the University of Delaware. He's what he likes to describe as a nonchalant dude. I don't know. But he is probably cooler than me. My little sister is 15 and is definitely smarter than the two of us combined. They grew up playing Gaelic football and soccer, so a lot of our life was kind of like traveling between states. My brother and I were born in Philadelphia, but when I was 4, we moved out of the city and into the suburbs so that my parents could give us the best education possible. I grew up going to elementary school, middle, and high school in the same school district and made incredible friends, who are here, and had access to amazing resources. However, it was definitely odd to come from my background and move into this area. See, the school district we grew up in is very different from the population of Philadelphia due to redlining. So this is a map of redlining right here. As you can see, so I live in an area called like Narberth, around that area, and as you can see, the areas that are kind of considered the best are right around where I live, and the areas that are kind of considered the worst are in the middle of the city. So I went from kind of living in the middle of the city to moving to the outskirts. So again, it was really odd to come from that background and then move into an area that was considered quote unquote better. As a result, growing up, I was always one of a handful of students of color in my class. I specifically remember in my AP Lang class, I was one of 4 students of color out of 32 people. I was also one of only 2 biracial students in the whole class. And that class ratio was really normal. I've always been one of the only biracial people in a room, in my grade, and in my school. I remember in 4th grade, we all sat down to fill out a standardized testing form. When the teacher got to the race and ethnicity option, she told us to fill in one option. However, I was confused when I looked at the options. White/Caucasian, Black/African American, Asian, Pacific Islander, American Indian/Native American, other. I remember sitting there and debating through what I should answer. Should I choose other? No, I knew my ethnicity, so that wasn't quite right. So should I choose white? Should I choose Asian? I remember helplessly staring at the page. I wanted to raise my hand and ask what I should do, but everyone seemed to be doing fine, and I didn't want to bring attention to myself, so I decided to just choose one and move on. This experience highlights my experience at a PWI, or primarily white institution. I often felt like I had to choose between my racial identities in fear of being ostracized. Most of the time, I didn't even feel like I had the right to choose. I remember in 2nd grade, I had a few Asian friends I would hang out with at an after-school program. One day, they were all talking about how their moms save plastic bags from grocery stores. I don't know if anyone else's mom does this, but mine does. So I remember chiming in and saying, oh, my mom does the same thing. One of the girls looked at me and told me I wasn't allowed to join the conversation because I wasn't really Asian. When I tried to explain to her that yes, I was in fact Asian, she told me I couldn't speak Chinese and my dad was white, so I wasn't allowed to be Asian. As an adult, I can look back on this experience and be like, what? But as a kid, it really did stick with me. I didn't have the words for the confusion I felt about my identity, and I didn't have anyone to talk about these feelings with because I didn't know anyone like me. If you're biracial, you know how better than anyone how common these experiences are. So identity denial, when an ethnic/racial identity is challenged by others, is something many biracial people experience. Research on biracial individuals has shown that identity denial is often correlated with greater perceived conflict between identities and lower levels of belonging. Research has also shown that these feelings often lead to increased rates of depression and stress amongst multiracial youth in comparison to monoracial youth. The biggest protective factors against these psychological effects is identity pride, which can often be facilitated by a trusted adult in a person's life. This includes parents telling their kids about their racial heritage and also making sure that their child feels comfortable in both cultures. Unfortunately for me, love my parents, but this was not my experience. Although my dad was really comfortable talking about his experience in Ireland, my mom grew up in a really white neighborhood and had to deal with a lot of racial discrimination herself. As a result, it's always felt like she was really disconnected from Taiwanese culture. Anytime anyone made a joke about my grandparents' accent, she would just kind of laugh along. She would constantly say things like, "They're so Asian," like it was an insult. As a result, I never thought about that learning about Taiwan and the culture was a good thing, and I really wasn't encouraged to learn more. Instead of embracing both cultures, I decided it was best to try and assimilate with my white peers. I genuinely think I would have gone my whole life trying to ignore the fact that I was Asian if it wasn't for a very fateful YouTube video I saw. When I was in 8th grade, I kept getting a YouTube recommendation to watch a video by a music band called BTS. I was like really confused. I was like, who are these people? But eventually I just gave up trying to ignore the video and decided to just watch it. I was certain I wasn't gonna enjoy it, but I was getting sick of it showing up. The next thing I know, I'm like 2 hours deep into BTS lore videos, trying to decode the meaning of Spring Day, and already subscribed to 2 channels that play BTS songs on the piano. Though it surprised me at the time, I really liked their music and the message that they spread in their songs. As I began to get more into BTS, I began educating myself more on South Korean culture and Asian culture in general. I started to think more globally and became more curious about Taiwanese culture in general. How is it similar to South Korean culture, and how is it different? My parents, however, didn't accept my newfound interest. They would both constantly tease me about liking girls, how they couldn't tell them apart, etc. While it was probably innocent joking on their part, it made me feel like I had to keep my interest in anything Asian a secret. Again, it made me feel as though I had to choose to be white because they wouldn't accept me as anything else. Yet at the same time, I knew I didn't completely relate to my white peers. I felt lost and confused, unsure of who I was and where I fit in. However, my parents' disapproval did not completely stop my desire to learn more about Taiwanese culture. In my sophomore year of high school, my history teacher assigned us to choose to study any topic we found interesting, as long as it fell before the year 1960. I don't know why he chose that year, but whatever. I decided to take the opportunity to learn more about my family's history before they came to the United States. For the assignment, we had to use a primary resource, and thankfully my grandparents were willing to be interviewed by me. I wasn't sure how the experience was going to go, because normally we just had stilted conversations about school and not much else, but the conversation ended up being a lot more fruitful than I expected, and I learned a lot more about my family that day than ever before. So let's go back to the slide. Who am I on my mom's side? I learned that my family came over from southern China to Taiwan in 1791. So again, there's my mom. And that's China and Taiwan. My grandparents both grew up in Hsinchu, where they were taught Hokkien and Japanese. During World War II, both of my families were deeply impacted by the bombing. And when Chiang Kai-shek came to Taiwan in 1949, after the Chinese Civil War, he forced people in Taiwan to learn and speak Mandarin. So my grandparents had to acquire a whole new language. Both of my grandparents went to Taiwan National University for medical school. Theirs, by the way, is my grandparents. Yes. My grandma was actually the first girl in her province to ever be accepted into medical school, and they even created a scholarship in her name to help other girls go to medical school as well. They moved to the United States for residency and had my mom. During this time, immigration restrictions were also lifted in the United States, and my grandparents made the decision to stay here and work towards bringing their family with them. So this is a family picture, yay. After they left that night, my mom turned to me and said with shock, "I have never heard them speak that much in one go." My whole family was enraptured by their stories, including my mom. I learned so much about them through that conversation and realized how important their culture was to them. I always thought that because my grandparents didn't talk about their childhoods, they never wanted to share their culture with my siblings and I. Instead, I realized they were just waiting for us to ask. After seeing how proud my grandparents were to pass down their stories and culture to us, I finally felt like I had permission to embrace my Asian heritage. I didn't bother hiding my interests in Asian media from my parents. I would sit after dinner and ask my grandparents numerous questions about their experiences in Taiwan, and I felt more comfortable in my identity than I'd ever felt in years, and was proudly calling myself an Asian American. When I entered Northeastern in the fall of 2021, I knew I wanted to be part of the PAACx community. I had spent the summer stalking all the different Instagram pages and seeing how many different cultural organizations Northeastern had. I was in awe. My high school had exactly 0 cultural organizations until I was in my senior year. I was excited to hopefully meet people like me and couldn't wait to join clubs like CSA and AASIA. However, not all of my fantasies became a reality. When I went to my first ASU meeting, I didn't feel welcomed in the way that I had hoped or expected. While looking around the room, I only spotted a few people like me. When I tried to start a conversation with the people next to me, they seemed disinterested in talking to me once they realized I couldn't speak Chinese. The only person that would talk to me was another biracial student sitting across the table from me. The first event of the year was a speed dating event, so people were walking from table to table. Me and the other biracial student noticed that no one came up to our table to talk to us. We ended up looking at each other halfway through the event and deciding to just leave and grab dinner together. The experience stuck in my head. I identified as Asian American and therefore thought I would fit in with everyone else. However, I left feeling disconnected from almost everyone in the room. In 2018, the National Public Radio coined the term racial imposter syndrome, or feeling like an outsider in your own race. That sentiment perfectly encaptures how I feel and sometimes how I felt then and sometimes still feel now. So great. I walked out of high school feeling like I finally had my identity figured out, and the first week of college, I'm already confused again. I thought I was Asian American, and yet I felt as though there was this huge divide between my experiences and everyone else in the community. If someone was to ask me how I felt in those moments, I don't think I'd know how to answer. I almost didn't go back to any PAACx events because I wasn't sure if I could even assume the label Asian American anymore. However, I was still intrigued by a program called AASIA, or Asian American Students with Actions, as I'm sure you guys know. The AAC Instagram described it as like a small program where first-year students would get assigned a mentor within the Asian American community and have bi-weekly discussions about the Asian American experience. I thought maybe having a mentor would make me feel more connected to the community, so I decided to give it a go and go to the information session. When I stepped into the room, though, I felt the pit of my stomach drop. Just like in the ASU meeting, it felt as though there were no people who looked like me in the room. All thoughts from my childhood came rearing back. Did I belong here? I shifted uncomfortably in my seat and waited for the time to pass. When the people organizing the meeting gave us time to talk to one another, I fully expected no one to talk to me like the first meeting I was at. To my surprise, one of the girls in the row in front of me turned and introduced herself to me. We found out we had a lot in common. She was the same major as me, we were both first years, we were both thinking of going into pre-med, but we weren't quite sure. When we got to the topic of our family backgrounds, I mentioned that I was white and Asian. And instead of shrinking away, she happily exclaimed that she was white and Asian too. You know when you walk into a lecture hall and you think you don't know anyone in the class, so you're like kind of awkwardly sitting by yourself, but then all of a sudden one of your friends walks in and you're like, oh my God! That's exactly what this felt like. We both became super animated and we were talking about our experiences growing up and how people always asked us, what are you? I began thinking I could belong in a space like Asia. Maybe if this girl was here, it wouldn't be weird if I joined too. I decided to submit an application and see what happened. So she's not here, but shout out to Emily Cohen because she's like the sole reason I decided to apply to Asia. And it ended up being one of the best decisions of my college career. I always joke that at least half my friendships are from Asia, so yeah. As much as I love Asia though, it couldn't fully change the fact that I never felt comfortable in PAACx spaces. I generally consider myself to be a friendly person, so it felt hard to experience this invisible barrier that kept people from wanting to get to know me. So I guess it was back to the drawing board. I was no longer really comfortable identifying as Asian American as my experiences felt so different from other people's. And while I was lost, I was really glad to have Emily during this time period because it felt like there was at least someone else who understood what I was going through. One night at the dining hall after an Asian meeting, she mentioned that she had been wanting to go to MSU. I had never heard about the club, but she said that they were the mixed student union for students with mixed identities, so I was really intrigued. I'd never been to a space of mostly mixed people before and had no idea what to expect. What I didn't expect was for that meeting to be as therapeutic as it was. During the meeting, the e-board had everyone go around and share what their mix was. It turns out the vice president was also Taiwanese and Irish, and to this day, she is the only person I've ever met who has the same mix as me. For the first time in my life, I heard stories similar to mine. People feeling ostracized in their own families and not feeling as though they had not feeling as though they fit into any cultural space on campus. I remember one student shared that they were often made fun of by their black side of the family for being too white. Another student shared that they were no longer comfortable attending Oral del Cafe at the LSCC due to the fact that their Spanish was obviously much worse than everybody else's, and they felt like people didn't fully believe that they were Latina. Though these experiences and stories weren't the exact same as mine, they resonated with the same feelings that I felt: loneliness, lack of belonging, and identity denial. MSU was the first cultural space that I felt truly seen. After that meeting, I began to think more about the way I labeled myself. If I was shown a bubble sheet and asked to fill out my race, would I fill out white? Would I fill out Asian? Or would there be a new option, biracial? I went on deep dives trying to research and understand the multiracial experience. It turns out that multiracial people make up one of the fastest growing populations in the United States and also amongst college campuses, with our enrollment increasing by 120% between 2010 and 2018. Despite those impressive numbers, much of the research that exists suggests that multiracial people face unique hardships that are different from their monoracial peers. One of the most prominent themes that emerges is multiracial microaggressions, which is microaggressions that are based on multiracial status, which send hostile, derogatory, or negative messages towards multiracial persons. So this can be done, oh, I missed the slide, my bad. But this can be done in a multitude of ways, as I've kind of listed up here. Just to explain one of the terms, by the way, pathologizing of multiracial identity experiences is just when monoracial people assume things about a biracial person due to their outward appearance. I think during the duration of my speech, I've kind of illustrated moments where I've had to deal with each of these, and it just goes to show that these experiences are not unique to me. The problem is our society is built on this idea that race is singular and discrete. This ideology not only makes it easier to create racial rankings within white society, but it also forces mixed race individuals to either be invisible or choose one side that represents them the best. This is obviously harder said than done, and the strict categorization can lead to feelings of racial isolation, loneliness, and also exacerbate mental health issues. While it's gratifying to know that my experience isn't a unique one, I also found myself wondering if anything could be done to help biracial people feel more comfortable in their identities. So this kind of leads me to where I'm at now. So my life now. This question that I had drove me to join the Belonging and Social Identities Lab, or BASIL, my junior year. At BASIL, we study the identity experiences of people who hold multiple identities and how people who hold multiple identities or otherwise stigmatized identities are perceived by others. Our lab is currently investigating topics such as how perceptions of multiracial individuals influence this past election, and how children also conceptualize multiracial identities. It's been an amazing experience to be involved in these, and also learn more about multiracial identities. I've also had the opportunity to create my own project. I've decided to investigate third spaces for multiracial individuals. So third spaces are places where multiple heritage individuals can affirm their identity with people of the same identity, such as the Mixed Student Union. I'm interested in seeing whether these spaces can cause an increase in multiracial pride and also allow multiracial individuals to feel more comfortable with identifying with the multiracial label rather than the monoracial label. So shameless plug time, but if you are multiracial or multicultural, I highly recommend that you scan that QR code. It'll just send you to a survey, and it'll really help me with my research. But yeah, over my years at Northeastern, I've been really lucky to meet incredible people in Asia, MSU, and BASIL. And I've come to realize that my third grade teacher was wrong. There's no need to circle one option when it comes to race. I'm allowed to coexist as a white, Asian American, and biracial person. I found that identifying myself as this has been really liberating. I no longer feel the need to adhere to social expectations for one race over the other, and I feel as though I can truly be myself. This freedom has surprisingly made me feel more comfortable in packed spaces because I don't feel like I need to fit a certain criteria to be Asian enough. I am a biracial Taiwanese and Irish individual, which means that sometimes I don't know what certain Asian foods taste like or how to speak my grandparents' native tongue. However, I am eager to learn more about my culture, and I'm incredibly lucky that I get to be part of two different cultures. So I hope that for monoracial people, you've gained a new experience. The next time you're in a space, take a look around the room and see how many biracial students there are. If there's not a lot, is there a way that you can improve these numbers? How can you help cultivate spaces for biracial peers? For everyone who is multiracial here, I hope that if any part of my story resonated with you, it serves as comfort. You are not alone in your experience. Don't ever be afraid to go against the grain and fill in as many bubbles as you need. Thank you.